In this cinematic episode, we'll explain how Warren Beatty's apartment changed the course of a Dalek attack, why a group of schoolgirls came close to alien enslavement, and we talk to one of the men responsible for the film's epic visual effects. Make sure you subscribe to ensure you're notified of Episode 4, landing in the vicinity of Sloane Square next week. In the summer of 1965, Peter Cushing starred as Doctor Who in a film adaptation of the first Dalek television serial. Its success prompted a sequel, which was announced on the 16th of December 1965. Peter Cushing would return in an adaptation of the second Dalek TV serial, and it would be retitled Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD. It went into production at Shepperton in Surrey, England at the end of 1965. This map shows 4 main sound stages in the centre of the site, with workshops and other support buildings clustered around the outside. To the northwest stood the largest stage in Europe, which had been erected on the site in 1948. The first production, Doctor Who and the Daleks, had also been made on Shepperton's Stage H, as pictured in the background of these publicity photos. It was to this vast space that the crew returned in January of 1966 to build the first set for the sequel. The underside of a Dalek Saucer was constructed from timber and plaster, and surrounding it the ruined buildings of post-apocalyptic London were fabricated. 3 stories were built, above which the corrugated walls and ceiling of the studio were visible. The faux derelict roofs were supported from above, as was the underside of the saucer, which was suspended by cables. In order to hide their workings and extend the set, a matte painting by visual effects artist Gerald Larne was used to complete the illusion, and the set was dressed with debris. Larne had only started working at Shepperton in 1965, and his third professional job as a matte artist was to paint these mountain ranges for planet Skaro in the first Dalek movie. This is him at work on The Amorous Adventures of Moll Flanders, a film which becomes a surprising part of the background to Daleks Invasion Earth. The Dalek Saucer presented its own challenges, as he explained.
At that point, the flying saucer model, which was later to be filmed on our effects stage, had not yet been made. The only saucer reference I had to work from was a selection of scale drawings being prepared for construction of the model. I can remember it being a tricky operation trying to design the craft from those drawings, and at the same time ensure the saucer sat convincingly on the circular underbelly built on the set. It ended up being a series of compromises with which I was never entirely satisfied.
Inside the saucer, the walls were dressed with computer panels hired from a prop store at Pinewood. This unit inside the robotizing chamber was recycled from Curse of the Fly, which had also been filmed at Shepperton some months earlier. A couple of months after being used in the Dalek Saucer, this prop would be hired for the TV version of Doctor Who in the Space Museum. Similarly, these stock panels can also be seen later in TV episodes of Doctor Who, for example in The War Machines and The Underwater Menace. Almost immediately, the production hit problems, as here stuntman Eddie Powell falls through this awning and breaks his leg on landing. Ever the professional, he limps on so that he can hit his mark to be exterminated. Following a trip to hospital, he resumed his position with his leg in plasticast, as seen here, and a final shot was picked up with his leg conspicuously cropped out of frame. The second major sequence to be shot required studio lights to be lowered in order to simulate nighttime. The Dalek prop we number 7 challenges the character of David disguised as a Roboman. In the foreground is one of several scrap cars used during filming. There was then a break as the studio was redressed for the battle sequence. Pyrotechnics was set up and the scrap car was tipped onto its side. The same Dalek number 7 was repositioned at the top of the ramp for the next shot, where it challenged David for a second time. It was then swapped for prop number 14, which has clear differences such as a black eye stalk, a more tarnished dome, and a bigger gap below the slats. You can find out more about the fate of the Dalek on the right in our second episode. With a little image enhancement, it is clearly an empty casing, which is then flung down the ramp. Pyrotechnics are detonated as polystyrene rocks cushion its fall backwards. There was no consistent approach to using stunt props, as demonstrated by the use of Dalek number 5 here, a hero prop seen earlier on the ramp, which then had explosive charges detonated on it. It was cleaned up afterwards and continued to be used throughout the film. For this high shot of the rebel attack, 7 Daleks were used to form a phalanx. A reverse angle used the same 7 Daleks, with 3 moved to the back of the set. This small amount of underwhelming Dalek footage was all that was initially shot of the aliens in what was intended to be an early set-piece action sequence. Another hint at the hectic nature of the shoot is here, where actor Andrew Keir is not even provided with a bomb to throw at the Daleks. Filming then moved outside, only a short distance away, to Shepperton Backlot's standing set for the scene in which Wyler and Susan crashed their van through a Dalek blockade. This set was supposed to depict 22nd century London, but not only did it look very old-fashioned, it had other strange quirks, such as this American-style fire hydrant and a glitzy neon arrow. What was the cause of this clash of styles? The set was built at least 2 years earlier, possibly for the French film Allez France, which was renamed here as The Counterfeit Constable. The film featured many British actors, including Bernard Cribbins. The set was built around a crossroads, with additional junctions at the north and south ends. Here we'll take a 360-degree tour of the street's landmarks, as seen when they were newly built in Allez France. And the arrow on the left will show the camera direction. Starting facing north, a key point of interest is this archway, and a couple of doors down is a shop with white frontage which will become important. On the northeast corner of the crossroads is a post office with brown doors. As we turn to face south, the facade at the end of the street disguises the short extent of the standing set. On the southwest corner there is a bank with decorative pillars, and on the northwest corner is an orange building with recessed diagonal frontage. And this completes a spin of the main junction. Jumping to the south end of the street, the set dressing even featured a police public call post, complete with a door sign familiar to those who know the TARDIS well. Following completion of Allez France, the shop frontages were left as a standing set to entice future filmmakers to shoot on the lot. A few months later, the aforementioned Amorous Adventures of Moll Flanders was filmed here, with the mid-20th century architecture converted to the new 18th century period setting. An easy landmark to spot is this archway at the north end. Here, Moll Flanders exits what used to be the post office, still with its brown doors. The building at the north end of the street was replaced by this gigantic painted backdrop of St Paul's Cathedral. The next movie to make use of the street set took place in present-day New York, and the backdrop was changed to portray the Empire State Building. Look carefully and you will see the archway has been painted brown, and above it, a red neon arrow has been created as set dressing. In this movie, entitled Promise Her Anything, star Warren Beatty is seen here, exiting a completely new apartment building which was constructed in keeping with the Manhattan architecture. By referring back to this photograph from Moll Flanders, we can see what used to be the eastern street leading off the crossroads was filled in by the new brownstone frontage in which the protagonist lived. The neighbouring building was also remodelled for consistency, and the new entrance was given pillars with a distinctive spiral pattern. The rest of the street was redressed with US-type fire escapes, fire hydrants and lampposts, many of which remained in situ after production wrapped, and this solves the mystery of the transatlantic flourishes seen later when the Daleks invade. The best images of the New York set come from the 1965 production of the first Peter Cushing movie, Doctor Who and the Daleks. Publicity photos were taken of the cast and their alien co-stars on the standing set, ironically providing an early version of Daleks in Manhattan. The next film in production here was Nightcrawler, in which the new frontage with the spiral pillars can be seen here. Footage was also shot on the northwest stretch of the street, looking south towards the bank, circled here. The studio site itself was used to portray a government research establishment, and several sound stages can be seen in the background of these shots. The street set was regressed back in time once more for A Study in Terror, where the archway can be seen here. It was used in several episodes of Danger Man, before the next significant production, The Great St Trinian's Train Robbery. This is the white shop near the archway, which was converted into a hairdresser. The shop to its right was refitted as Bert's Fish and Chip Bar, and the signage is still present as shooting got underway of the Daleks' blockade, allowing us to prove that this van scene was the first thing shot on the standing set soon after St. Trinian's. The St. Trinian's film also linked back to the TV series of Doctor Who due to the appearance of Carol Ann Ford. So it was a process of restructuring over a 2-year period that resulted in a strange blend of old-fashioned England and contemporary New York styles. This set had become naturally weathered, and tarpaulins were used to quickly cover shop signs in order to create London of the 22nd century. Shooting got underway with 15 Dalek props taken to the backlot, and establishing shots were done using 10 of them in the road. Evidence suggests that an initial take of the van colliding with these Daleks was not used. This photograph shows a particular setup of Dalek props and vehicles which does not correspond to any of the footage which makes it onto screen. We speculate that the reason for its exclusion was because the Dalek obscured from view here was not struck properly by the van and barely moved. Corroborating this theory is the fact that on the second take, the van has not yet sustained any damage to its wheel arches, which would have been dented if the first impact had gone according to plan. The Dalek in the foreground has clearly already suffered some damage on its hemispheres and dome, so the evidence points to a collision having occurred, shown by the scratched and dented Dalek, but it wasn't a clean strike, and the van was relatively unscathed. It seems a safe conclusion that the abortive first take is depicted in this photo, which makes this the second take, in which Dalek 14 has been reassembled and cleaned up. And this shot also shows how the slats were bent up at the end in order to fit the pyrotechnic charges underneath. This angle is take number 3, and Dalek 14 on the left has been reassembled again, but still shows black charring from the last explosion, and the bent slats at the front illustrate where the next round of charges have been mounted. The wheel arches of the van are now damaged from the successful impacts. Because the Daleks were so sturdily built, the FX team looked for ways to make the collision more destructive, otherwise the Daleks simply divided into their main component sections. So for this take, the fiberglass skirt was cut at the front and rear so that it fractured on impact. This shot of the aftermath shows the break, along with the tape on the inside edge which had held the skirt together. Examination of the shops in the background shows that the art department was working on the standing set even while filming was taking place. This is the white shop which became the hairdresser in St. Trinian's, and next door, the shop that had been Bert's Fish and Chip Bar at the start of the blockade shoot. The signage has been removed by the time the third take is done, and then this photo shows the replacement which is put up saying tobacconists in red lettering. The new sign can be seen in all the later shots which were completed. This final action shot, filmed on the back of a moving vehicle, shows the bank on the corner, and on the other side of the street is the new brownstone building erected for Warren Beatty's character in Promise Her Anything, and blocking off the old Eastern Junction where the van might otherwise have made a faster escape. The smoke from the explosions conveniently hid the fact that there was nothing at the far end of the street, and this shot of the van escaping gives away the fact the buildings are nothing more than facades, with the woods visible beyond. With the effects work completed, the aftermath was filmed, and as Dalek 4 delivers its line to camera, there is a great shot of an imperfection in its dome which makes it easily identifiable later. This publicity photo shows Dalek 4 with the same bump visible, and a chalk outline has been drawn on the road to try to ensure it maintained a constant position across multiple takes. The new tobacconist signage which has been added at this point tells us what the next scene was to be filmed. This was a night shoot for the robbery at the start of the movie. The white hairdresser from St. Trinian's was refurbished once again to become the jewellers around which the action centred. An enormous explosion then destroys the whole shop front, from which the thieves miraculously escape. Stepping back in time to the street's first appearance in Allée France, these are the same 3 shops which have been heavily modified in the intervening years. Bernard Cribbin's character then attempts the truncheon-throwing method of stopping a moving vehicle, but this fails. A quick comparison to the Dalek blockade scene shows how obvious it is that this is the same location. Looking back again at Allée France, this is the post office with the brown door, seen here in Dalek Invasion of Earth, and across the road on the opposite corner is where the TARDIS lands. Another angle shows the bank with its white pillars. Facing it on the northwest corner was the orange building with the recessed diagonal shop frontage. This cavity now came in useful for the construction of the London Underground station, allowing for the creation of a small entry hall into which the characters could run. Bizarrely, the name chosen for this station was Embankment, which did not exist when the film was made in 1966. There had been a station with this name from 1906, but this had been phased out by 1915 in favour of Charing Cross. The name Embankment would return in 1979, and now we know it lasts until 2150 AD. Once shooting on the standing set was concluded, the production team next turned its attention to another part of the backlot. Beyond the street to the north was an area of open fields lined with trees, and it was on this portion of the Shepperton backlot that the mine workings were constructed. This is the left-hand side of that field as it appeared in the TV series Danger Man, and by paying close attention to distinctive parts of the tree line here and here, you can definitely see this is the same location later used in Doctor Who. Observe at the bottom of the picture in the Danger Man footage there is a trackway and a slope which is overgrown with bushes and weeds. By placing this in a wider context, we can see those same bushes alongside the trackway, and the slope is at the edge of a large dip in the land. This natural depression was an ideal setting for the mine entrance, and a section of the small hill was excavated away and shored up. The same trackway can be seen in the St. Trinian's film. And again, the trees are a useful landmark here, matching up with what we see behind the mine workings. These particular cut branches here can be identified in the background of the street scene, which shows the relationship between the two sites. The landscape was filled with any available material from stock, including what appears to be a railway signal box. This view also shows the position of the shack, which is used as the rebel hideout and later destroyed by the Daleks. The scene in question features a notable piece of set dressing, 2 aircraft engines placed upside down next to the shack. These were taken from a full-sized replica of a Vickers Vimy built in 1954 by none other than Shawcraft, creators of the Dalek props. The plane was made for a feature film that was never completed and would have looked like this. In order to capture Doctor Who, 8 Dalek props were used, but with only 7 operators, the one on the far right, which we number 15, remains conspicuously stationary. The operators were then removed and the Dalek casings were repositioned slightly further back. Special effects artist Ted Samuels and his team filled the shack with pyrotechnics, which were detonated in impressive fashion. Fire hoses were on standby should anything go wrong. Amongst the props taken on location were 2 Daleks with unusual appendages. This one by the shed had a cup and saucer type attachment. In the background here, a V-shaped pincer which is different to the rest of the claws in the movie. There is a better view of the pincer during the blockade scene, which shows that this Dalek also has spokes on its gun. As we revealed in our previous episode, this Dalek was not built brand new for the movie, as it can be seen in this photograph taken 2 months earlier for the stage play Curse of the Daleks. It, along with its 4 compatriots, were hired from John Gale Productions to appear in Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD. In the Shepperton landscape, there is an embankment scene in many shots with a fence at its summit. This is, in fact, the Queen Mary Reservoir. Referring to the map, the field beside Stage H and the street set is where the mine was constructed, and the reservoir is situated to the north of the studios, and once you know to look out for it, it's quite obviously visible in the background during much of the location work. All the female extras were then asked to leave the set, and the exclusively male rebellion was staged. During this scene, the Dalek props were given some pretty rough treatment, including a collision with a minecart, and this prop loses its eye stalk. Women were permitted to return for the less hazardous moment as the rest of the slaves escaped the mine area. This shot, which was not used in the final cut of the film, provides an excellent view of the right-hand side of the backlot behind the mine. When a similar angle was shot in the film, this area was disguised by another matte painting by Gerald Larne, and here he explains to us in detail how he worked.
Our special effects camera and optical printer facilities were widely regarded within the industry as second to none. With live action footage, which had been filmed by a unit cameraman, the footage was required to be rigorously tested in case there was evidence of camera motor vibration, for instance. It soon became the norm that the material would be organised and filmed by ourselves, virtually functioning as a second unit. A 6-foot by 3-foot glass was prepared, with a thin but even coat of white emulsion in front of the optical printer to project a single frame of the film. This allowed the matte line to be clearly established, and whatever needed to be added as painted imagery could be drawn in accurately. Now, in the painting studio, the oil painting work could be progressed by referring to a handheld viewer containing a single frame of the film for colour matching, etc. The optical printer was able to produce a version of the original footage, which now contained a black area, exactly the shape and position of the painting on the glass. With the printer then functioning as a camera, containing a version of the original film plus the black unexposed area, the painting could begin being filmed as an image now, combined with the live action.
After the plate shots had been captured for the matte painting, along with any other coverage needed, the final scene at the mine workings was that of its destruction. Flares were triggered, producing large amounts of smoke, and the platform at the entrance was pulled down, although barely visible. In the narrative, after the van smashes through the blockade, it travels through a more rural location, passing by an incongruous Mediterranean-style farmstead with whitewashed walls and terracotta roof tiles. Despite the continental feel of this architecture, we are still in Shepperton Studios. Research indicates these buildings were probably built for the film Joey Boy a year earlier, set partly in Italy. But it also appeared in episodes of Danger Man, doubling as a French farmhouse, and Spanish Getaway. If you look carefully through the trees as the van arrives at the farm, you will see the square shape of a church tower. The reason for the situation of the nearby church, and the existence of the lane that the van is travelling on, is rooted in the history of the village next to Shepperton Studios. A church was first built here in 1135, in the hamlet of Littleton. Then in the 1400s, a timber-framed manor house was built nearby. By the Victorian period, the grounds had become landscaped with trees and gardens. On the banks of the adjacent river, a boathouse was constructed, and later a cottage and a bridge. Then in 1931, Littleton Park was purchased for the burgeoning film industry, and the studios incorporated a number of historical buildings. Sanders of the River in 1934 is one of the earliest uses in which this African village was built on the banks of the River Ash. The mine and street were situated to the northwest, but it was over on the east side of the site that the church was located on Squires Bridge Road. The van turned off this road and down the lane and past the Mediterranean farmhouse, hence the view in the film with the church in the distance. Next, we see the van drive down a rougher dirt track, but in reality this is not a continuation of the same lane. After passing the farm, the van was returned to the junction with Squires Bridge Road to travel almost exactly the same route, but on a parallel track. This is the original driveway up to the manor, and on the second shot, the van is in fact passing behind the farmhouse. Look closely in the film here, and you will actually see the back of the farm set. The camera pans down to the wheels of the van as it passes. Had it not done so, we would have been afforded a view of the impressive manor house in the background. After Wyler and Susan abandon their vehicle, this shot allows another glimpse of the large building with its ornate white frontage, a good view of which can be seen in this episode of Danger Man. The beautifully manicured lawns and trimmed hedges make it quite obvious this is filmed on a country estate, rather than in a post-apocalyptic landscape. Next, Wyler and Susan come across one of the 3 boathouses built by the river. This was situated next to the footbridge which made up part of the original entrance to the manor house. This map of the studios from the 1930s describes the area as the Japanese Gardens. To the right of the boathouse is a shallow pond featuring a reclining statue. After Wyler and Susan cross the bridge, as they descend the steps you can see in the background the dilapidated roof of one of the other boathouses. This is the same bridge in the film Die Monster Die starring Boris Karloff, and here it is again in Danger Man, where it featured in at least 2 episodes. Here we have a good view of the reclining statue. During a night shoot, Dalek 4 was used to apprehend Susan and Wyler, and it can again be identified by the bump on its dome. This concluded most of the material to be shot outdoors, and production moved back inside to Studio H, where a large amount of construction was underway. So join us in the concluding part of Shepperton's Secrets, where we discover what links a double murderer to a shop window dummy, Michael Craze to the Daleks' mining operations,
I'm sorry to hear that.
and Chris Hemsworth to the Dalek Supreme.